what your avoidant partner actually feels when they shut you out. One of the most painful experiences in a relationship is watching someone you love slowly become emotionally distant without fully explaining why. At first, it feels confusing because nothing dramatic may have even happened between you. There was no huge argument, no obvious betrayal, and no clear ending to the connection. But suddenly, their energy changes in ways you can deeply feel but cannot fully explain. Their messages become shorter, their warmth becomes inconsistent, and their emotional presence slowly starts disappearing. And the hardest part is that the more distant they become, the more desperately you search for answers. When an avoidant partner shuts you out emotionally, most people assume it means they no longer care. But the truth is often much more psychologically complicated than that. Because avoidants are not always emotionally detached in the way people think they are. In many cases, they are emotionally overwhelmed, emotionally conflicted, and emotionally afraid at the exact same time. What looks cold on the outside is often emotional chaos hidden underneath years of emotional suppression. The mistake many people make is assuming that avoidants feel nothing when they pull away. But avoidants usually feel too much in ways they were never taught how to process safely. Closeness can trigger emotions they don't fully understand or know how to regulate. Love can feel comforting one moment and emotionally suffocating the next. Vulnerability can feel beautiful and terrifying at the exact same time. So instead of moving toward emotional discomfort, they instinctively move away from it. And this is where the confusion begins for their partner. Because when you feel disconnected from someone you love, your natural instinct is usually to move closer. You want reassurance, communication, and emotional clarity. You want to talk things through and reconnect emotionally before the distance grows bigger. But for an avoidant person, emotional pressure often activates their internal defense system. The more emotionally intense the relationship becomes, the more trapped they can start to feel internally. That does not necessarily mean you are toxic or asking for too much. It means emotional intimacy is activating fears they learned long before they met you. Many avoidants grew up in environments where emotions were ignored, criticized, or emotionally unsafe. They learned that vulnerability could lead to rejection, shame, disappointment, or loss of control. So they adapted by becoming emotionally self-reliant and internally guarded. They trained themselves to survive emotionally without depending too deeply on other people. But here is the painful irony. Avoidants still crave love, connection, and emotional safety like everyone else does. The difference is that intimacy activates both desire and fear inside them at the same time. Part of them wants closeness deeply. Another part of them fears what closeness might eventually cost them emotionally. So when the relationship becomes emotionally intense, they often begin shutting down internally before they even realize it consciously. Their silence is not always about punishment or lack of care. Sometimes it is an unconscious attempt to regain emotional control over themselves. Distance becomes their coping mechanism when emotions start feeling too overwhelming. And while you may experience their withdrawal as rejection, they often experience it as emotional survival. That does not make the behavior healthy. But it does explain why avoidance can seem loving one moment and emotionally unavailable the next. Inside their mind, there is often a constant battle happening that you cannot see. Part of them misses you while they are avoiding you. Part of them thinks about texting you while simultaneously resisting the urge to do it. Part of them wants emotional closeness, while another part fears losing independence or emotional stability. This is why avoidance can appear calm on the surface while struggling internally underneath. They may distract themselves with work, routines, hobbies, social media, or isolation. But emotional suppression is not the same thing as emotional absence. Just because they are not expressing emotions outwardly does not mean emotions are not affecting them deeply. And this creates one of the most painful relationship dynamics imaginable. Because the anxious partner often becomes louder emotionally, while the avoidant partner becomes quieter emotionally. One person starts chasing reassurance, while the other starts retreating further into emotional distance. And both people end up feeling misunderstood, exhausted, and emotionally disconnected. The anxious partner feels abandoned and emotionally starved. The avoidant partner feels pressured and emotionally overwhelmed. And without awareness, both people accidentally trigger each other's deepest fears repeatedly. What many people never realize is that avoidants often feel guilt after shutting someone out. Not always immediately, but eventually. Because once the emotional intensity fades and they finally have space again, reality starts catching up to them emotionally. They begin thinking about the person they pushed away. They remember the warmth, the connection, and the emotional safety they struggled to stay present for. But by then, shame often enters the picture. And shame is something avoidants struggle with deeply. Because admitting emotional mistakes requires vulnerability, accountability, and emotional exposure. And those are the exact experiences avoidants spend most of their life trying to avoid internally. So instead of reopening the emotional conversation directly, many avoidants stay silent longer than they should, not because they never cared, but because they do not know how to return without facing uncomfortable emotions inside themselves. This is why avoidants sometimes disappear and then suddenly reappear later. Not because they forgot you, not because the relationship meant nothing to them, but because emotional distance temporarily helped them escape emotional overwhelm. And once the fear settles down, their emotional attachment quietly resurfaces again. But this creates another painful cycle. Because temporary closeness followed by repeated emotional withdrawal slowly damages trust over time. The partner on the receiving end begins feeling emotionally unsafe, anxious, and emotionally exhausted. They stop knowing which version of the relationship is real. The closeness or the distance. The warmth or the silence. And eventually, something important must be understood by both people. Love alone cannot heal an avoidant attachment style without self-awareness and emotional work. Because shutting people out may protect avoidance from temporary discomfort, but it also blocks the deep connection they secretly want. Healing only begins when avoidants become willing to face the emotions they usually run from internally. When they stop treating vulnerability like danger, when they stop seeing emotional closeness as a threat to their independence, and when they learn that healthy love does not require emotional disappearance to survive. And for the partner who keeps getting shut out, there is something important you must remember too. Their withdrawal is not proof that you are unlovable or emotionally too much. Many avoidants shut down not because their partner lacks value, but because intimacy activates unresolved fears inside them. That does not mean you should endlessly tolerate emotional unavailability or emotional neglect. But it does mean you should stop blaming yourself for someone else's inability to stay emotionally present. Because sometimes the silence of an avoidant partner says less about your worth and more about the emotional battles they still have not learned how to face.